Hello, my name is Dane, and I'm here to show you how my four classes I created work. So here we have the questions class. This is essentially the class this is essentially an object that represents each question told. They have four main fields, a string for offer, a string for a string for the actual questions tag, and a boolean for resolve. Basically this sort of sets if the question is resolved or not. True being it is resolved, false being unresolved. Here we have a simple constructor. Most time, yeah, of course, this is going to be set to false by default 90% of the time. Over there, we have a simple set resolve function that just sets whether that's the new value for resolve. And down here we have the simple validator. Basically, it just takes the strings. If it's less than or equal to 0 or greater than 4,000 characters, it returns the error message and returns none if there isn't any problems. And with the question text, I mean. Other than that, we just have simple get field functions for all the fields, just in case another function needs them. And then we have answers. The answers class essentially represents answers as offer, answer, text, helpful, and read. Helpful basically means an answer resolved an issue. Issue true, it has resolved it, and false if it hasn't. And read is a field that represents if the question answer has been read or not. True if it has been read, false if it's not been read. Here's a constructor. Again, most of the time they'll be these two here will be set to false by default. And then again, two more functions that set the helpful and read values, read, whatever. And then down here we have a valid answer function. It basically validates the answer. Again, same as the questions. The field can't be empty or somehow less than negative characters, and it can't be greater than 4,000 characters. And like the second question, and like the question class, it has all the return fields. It's basically just questions with a one field change, essentially. And then we have question subset Java. Let me just do that so you can see all the fields this caused. So basically, it creates a little private array list of questions that the object uses to store all the questions. Here we have a simple function that just adds a question to the array list, and then this is kind of the more interesting stuff. This right here is a function that returns an array, a list of unresolved questions. Basically, it parses through it creates a temporary array list and parses through the main list for all the questions that are marked as unresolved. So if the question is unresolved, it adds it to the list before returning it. And then this is set resolved. Essentially, this function takes an author name and the question text, and then, sorry, it parses through that for the following question. First instance, it finds the question. Sorry, don't know what's going on. It sets the resolve value for that true. So it basically calls that question set resolve of function to true, which is, you know, this one right here. So this set resolve calls this set resolve basically. And then recent questions. This one is kind of a big one because I'm not gonna lie, I had to do a little bit of research in order to figure out how to make this work. So, firstly, it creates a new array list of questions, and then it gets the current time. I'm essentially, or well, date essentially, and this is a format which formats the date into months, days, years. And then through this, it creates target time, which all this fancy code does is that essentially formats current time into this and then makes this equal to the current format current time. And then this function right here essentially minuses essentially subtracts a day from the current time. And then and then for the for loop, it basically parses through the list, gets the day, and turns them into dates. It's with the format time, and then it compares the two dates, and if the new date is on the same day or before or after the date, it gets added to the list, which is then printed. So you're not the list only returns questions that are basically a day or two older. That comment says not older than a day, but kind of aimed just recent. They didn't specify how recent they wanted the question, so like I went with a day or two essentially. Next up, related questions. Pretty simple. It takes a string term. It parses through all the questions in the array list to find. Sorry again, God, all the array. It parses through all the questions in the array list to see which question text contains the targeted string. If it does, it adds the question to the related array list and then it returns that. And then this thing right here just kind of gets every question no matter what. Next up, the answer subset. The answer subset is like the first with a few key differences. Like before, it has the array list, except its answers. This time it's of questions. And then add answers, which is just add questions but for answers. And then right here is when things get different. This function right here essentially parses through the array list of answers and looks for all the answers that have a false for their read value on you. Essentially, what it does is that if it finds the answer with false, it adds it to the unread array list, and then it sets the read value to true. Because essentially the idea is since you are printing it to the screen, the answer has technically been read. Therefore, it's not unread anymore. So yeah. And then set helpful string. This is basically set resolve, but for the helpful tag. It parses through an answer, looks for the string author and text, and if it finds it in return, it sets the helpful tag to true, meaning the answer was helpful. And oh, I nearly forgot. The resolve functions return false if they don't find anything. This is basically a signal that the user or question doesn't exist. Next, we have a related answers, which is essentially the same as the questions related, but for the answer subclass, parses through the answer array, looks for see if the answer text contains a certain substring, and if it does, it adds it to the related array list, and then it returns that. And then we have the get all answers array list, which is essentially get all answers array, which is essentially, getting all the answers. Also, like the unread one, if the current answer is it parses through all of them, and if the unread flag is marked as false, it marks it as true. So then it's count again the idea that since it's counted as read, it's no longer unread, so it just kind of flips the flag for that. And that's mostly it. There is the keen eye will notice the interactor tab. This is not part of the four classes. It's essentially a little tester program I came up with to essentially, make it a bit easier. I'm sure you guys might have to like test functions and all that, so I just kind of made this to be a bit easier. I know it's not automated tests, but like decided to do this since A, it's something I'm comfortable making, and B, if you come up with a test that might possibly break something you can test it here, and it'll essentially allow you to do it. It's a bit on the complex side, not gonna lie, but this is kind of an added plus. It doesn't do any of the calculations the class was supposed to do. It just kind of simulates how the team project is gonna send data and receive data from it, essentially. So yeah, it's not really important to like what these classes have. It's just kind of extra for convenience sake. And yeah, that's everything I have to say. Thank you for watching. I hope I didn't bore you to death.